Welcome to Asperia Holdings LLC Safety Training. Education is the key to working safely. All employees have an equal responsibility to helping ensure a safe workplace.
Workplace safety. If you follow these golden rules, you'll be less likely to be injured or to suffer illness at work. Work tidy. In order to keep yourself safe and working efficiently, you need to keep your workspace clean and tidy. Working in an untidy manner or workplace is stressful and frustrating, not to mention inefficient. Get training. One of the ways of reducing accidents in the workplace is training. You will be instructed in the safe use of equipment, machinery, and safe working practices. Be familiar with your workplace. You should be familiar with your workplace and the task or jobs you have to carry out. It is essential to know where the fire exits, call points, and fire extinguishers are located. Read the labels. Before using any product, always read the label for instructions and directions for its safe use, handling, and storage. Do what the signs say. Signs in the workplace are put up for a purpose. Obey them, they are there for your safety. Never obscure signs, add graffiti, or remove them. Regular maintenance and servicing. Keeping your plant, machinery, and equipment serviced and in good repair is good business sense. It will also reduce failure, breakdowns, and reduce the risk of accident and injury. Always disconnect and lock off equipment before starting maintenance work. Never try to fix equipment if you are not trained to do so. Report all accidents, incidents, and breakdowns. You should report all accidents, incidents, and near misses to a supervisor or manager. It is also good practice to report all equipment faults, breakdowns, and so on in the workplace that you think could be dangerous. Work within the safety guidelines. For every task, there should be safe working practices. Most of these will be based on common sense. Never take shortcuts or try to modify your task or equipment. Don't fool around. Your workplace has many hazards. Hundreds of people are injured every year when foolish actions go wrong. Use your common sense. Many accidents are caused by human error, and many can be prevented by common sense. Over the years of experience at school, at play, and at work, you have built up a vast knowledge of what is and what isn't dangerous. Slips, trips, and falls. Slips and trips are often seen as a joke. However, in reality, nothing could be further from the truth. Slips and trips are the most common causes of major injuries at work. They occur in almost all workplaces, and 95% of major slips result in broken bones, and they can also be the initial causes for a range of other accidents, such as falls from height. Most slips occur in wet or contaminated conditions. Most trips are due to poor housekeeping. The solutions to both are often simple and cost-effective. Your workplace will have many hazards, some of which are obvious and some that are not. These are some of the most common causes of slips, trips, and falls. Liquid spills. If you spill liquid, or see a liquid spill, whether it is water or any other liquid, clean it up immediately, because the next person might not see it and slip. Footwear. Always wear suitable footwear for the job you are doing. Uneven surfaces and stairs. If floor surfaces or stairs are worn or cracked, they can be a danger and need to be reported to your health and safety officer. Loose mats are also a danger. Make sure loose mats have good gripping properties. Objects on floors. If you drop something or see something lying around, pick it up, because something as small as a pen can cause serious damage when slipped on. Bad weather. Take care when working outside. Excessive water and ice can be serious hazards. Cables. Trailing cables are the most common causes of trips, but the easiest one to avoid. If possible, reroute the cable to a safer place. If the cable must be in a walkway, use a cable bridge or warning sign. Ladders. If you've not been trained to use a ladder at work, then don't use it. If you have, always inspect it to see that it's safe. Look for worn or missing rungs. Always place the ladder on a firm and flat base. Secure the ladder at top and bottom. If you can't secure it at the bottom, ask someone to foot the ladder. Desks and chairs. Using desks and chairs to work at height is extremely unsafe and should never be done. Swivel chairs are extremely dangerous when used as a step. Fixed installations. Climbing on machines or racking to gain height for working is dangerous. They are not designed for people to climb on, and you could be breaking the law. Don't do it. Preventing slips, trips and falls is not difficult. It's based on safe working practices and just plain old common sense. Common sense can mean fewer accidents, less suffering, fewer working days lost, increased production and increased profit. Common sense also helps save lives. Manual handling. Lifting, carrying, pushing and pulling are things we do every day without thinking, but these manual activities are one of the greatest causes of industrial injury within the workplace. If we think again about our little friend, we should realise that we shouldn't put ourselves into a dangerous situation. There are many things that you need to remember when thinking about the 4 categories of manual handling. Lifting. Stop and think. If you don't feel you can lift it, don't. If, however, you feel you can, place yourself in a good position, bend the knees and keep your back straight. Take a grip on the load and start to lift in a smooth upward movement. If you think at the start of the lift that the load is too heavy, don't continue. When you arrive at your destination, you need to reverse the lifting procedure to put your load down. Carrying. When carrying, keep the load close to your body and always maintain control. If there is one side of the load that is heavier than the other, then the heavier side should be closest to your body. Pushing. There are many products designed to help you move loads, from pallet trucks to wheelbarrows. However, the techniques are the same for all. Having checked that the route you are going to take is clear from people and obstructions, take a firm grip of the handle or handles, take the weight of the load, lean forward and use the power in your legs to push off. Pulling. Pulling is the least acceptable method of moving a load, but sometimes it's just unavoidable. If you find that you have to pull a load, maintain a straight back, grip the trolley or truck firmly, take the weight and use the power from your legs to start the movement slowly, smoothly and in a controlled manner. To recap, always use the correct technique and remember manual handling is your last resort. Use a mechanical aid if you can. We will now move on to possibly the most important aspect of health and safety. Fire safety. Fire can have devastating effects. It kills, injures, destroys property, and destroys business. Under the law, your employer has a duty to undergo a range of fire prevention and risk reduction procedures such as fire risk assessment, regular and adequate fire training of staff, safe and adequate means of escape, installation of fire safety equipment and fire emergency procedures. It can be reasonably easy to reduce the risk of a fire. Simple housekeeping seriously reduces the risk of a fire breaking out. It's usually when negligence takes place that fire hazards develop. The accumulation of rubbish is a potential fire hazard and is unnecessary. If you see a situation which you feel is a potential fire hazard, tell your supervisor or designated fire officer. When you start work either for a new company or in a new building, you must find out where the emergency exits are located and also where any fire extinguishers are positioned, and take notice of fire safety signs. You also need to know where your fire assembly point is. During a fire emergency, there are several important things that you need to do. Raise the alarm. Make sure the alarm has been raised. Don't assume that someone else has done it. Contact the emergency services. Some systems are linked directly to the fire brigade. If yours is not, call them as soon as it is safe. Evacuate the building. Only fight the fire if it is safe to do so. If it is safe, make sure you select the correct extinguisher. Red, water. For use with fires such as wood, textiles and paper, never on electrical fires. Black, CO2. Very good general purpose fire extinguisher, especially electrical fires. Blue, dry powder. Very good general purpose fire extinguisher, can however leave deep-seated fires to smoulder only to reignite later. Cream, foam. Suitable for most flammable liquid fires. If it is not safe to fight the fire, leave immediately. Don't stop to pick up any personal items and never return to a burning building. If you can, shut doors and windows in order to starve the fire from the oxygen it needs to spread. The next subject we will look at is COSH, or Control of Substances Hazardous to Health. COSH. Hazardous substances in the workplace are a potential threat to our short and long-term health. Every year there are hundreds of serious accidents involving hazardous substances, and in some cases leading to long-term permanent injury or illness, and in some cases even death. What is a hazardous substance? Hazardous substances come in many different forms, such as liquids, solids, gases, powders, dusts, bacteria and viruses, and vapour and fumes. All of these are equally dangerous and can affect many parts of your body. They could affect your skin. Skin can be burned, develop rashes, or absorb substances. Heart. The heart can be damaged by a wide range of substances, such as metal fumes that could have been inhaled. Lungs. Many substances that can be inhaled will damage your lungs. Kidneys. A lot of substances that get into your body will be filtered through your kidneys. During that process, you can suffer damage to these vital organs. Nervous system. Your nervous system is vital for your survival. Hazardous substances can have a deadly effect. As an employee, you must follow the safe working practices laid down by your employer. It is also up to your employer to make sure that if your job requires it, you have relevant training and instruction. The most important thing for you to remember whilst thinking about COSH is your personal protection. If a job is a risk to your health, then you must make sure that these risks are monitored by competent staff. You must also be provided with and wear the correct personal protective equipment, PPE. This is our next subject. PPE. The Personal Protective Equipment at Work Regulations 1992 states that every employer shall ensure that suitable personal protective equipment is provided to his employees who may be exposed to a risk to their health and safety. PPE is available to protect all parts of your body, including your eyes, ears, and respiratory system. The selection of PPE should be appropriate to the task and hazards it may present. The following criteria should be taken into consideration when choosing PPE for a particular job. The protective equipment should be suitable for the job, and it should give the user the right level of protection. It should take into account the needs of the user, that is, consideration to comfort and movement, and it should also be used and designed for the type of hazard that you're working with. As well as this, PPE needs to conform to British standards, taking into account specific regulations and specific job requirements. There is personal protective equipment to cover every part of the body. Head, hard hats and hairnets. Eyes, goggles, safety glasses or full face protection such as welding masks. Noise and your hearing, ear defenders or earplugs. Inhalation of fumes, dust masks, breathing apparatus and full face shields. Hands and arms, gloves, gauntlets, chainmail gloves. Upper body, high visibility jackets, overalls, thermal clothing, harnesses. Lower body, protective trousers, knee pads. Footwear, strengthened toe caps, slip-resistant soles. Specialist disposable gear. Certain PPE is meant as single wear only or disposable after use. It is vital that these types of PPE are only used once. They may present a contamination risk to you or other people if reused. Use it and dispose of it properly. Electrical safety. Electricity is one of the most dangerous things that you will come into contact with in your working life, but something most people use every day. There are certain do's and don'ts when you work with electricity. Report any faults immediately to your supervisor. Only work with properly connected and tested equipment. Pay attention to all safety signs. Ensure that any equipment you use is properly maintained. Inspect any electrical equipment, cables and connections before switching on. Only use CO2 fire extinguishers when fighting electrical fires. Don't overload circuits and sockets. Never work with poorly maintained or faulty equipment. Don't use electrical equipment in damp or wet conditions. Don't work on any equipment that you have not been trained on. Don't make your own repairs, leave them to qualified electricians. That brings us to the end of the basics of health and safety. I hope we have proved that health and safety is not something that you need to be scared of, and thinking simply about a situation often shows us what we need to know.
Active shooter prevention is more than a legal mandate. This is about virtuous leadership, recognizing a potential threat and preparing for it. Hoping that it won't happen to me is not enough. Hope is not a good strategy. It is clear from recent active shooter events that employers will need to provide some attenuating measures to protect their personnel from this form of workplace violence. The General Duty Clause, Section 5A1 of the Occupational Safety and Health Act, or OSHA, requires employers to provide their employees with a place of employment that is free from recognizable hazards that are causing or likely to cause death or serious harm to employees. Recent court rulings throughout the country have allowed negligence suits filed by victims of active shooters to proceed against employers for failing to provide defensive training to their employees. In other words, companies can no longer avoid their corporate responsibility to provide training on both how to spot potential active shooters and on how to react if so confronted. This is more than a simple calculus of risk reduction. It's about providing competent and effective protective training to persons in your charge. It is the essence of caring and virtuous leadership. The purpose of this video is not to alarm or frighten you, but rather to educate you on threat recognition and the appropriate steps to take if you find yourself in the vicinity of an active shooter. Hopefully, after watching this video, you will be able to better identify potential active shooters and report them before violence erupts. At the end, you'll be given a short 10-question quiz that will help ensure that you learn the right lessons from this instructional video. Remember, you must act quickly, escape, hide, or attack if ever confronted by an active shooter. This training will help you act quickly and appropriately in the eventuality of an attack.
Bring you some details on a breaking story out of Aurora, Colorado this morning. A very scary situation. A suburban Denver movie theater. Apparently there has been a mass shooting. What we're hearing from the police so far.
Mall outside of Portland, Oregon tonight. When as many as 60 shots rang out, the scene of holiday Americana turned into terrified chaos.
We've been telling you this morning there has been a shooting at a school in Newtown. This is the Sandy Hook Elementary School.
Gunfire erupts in a normally quiet office complex.
News reports down in New Orleans, according to local news reports, at least 12 people shot at a Mother's Day parade there.
A gunman is dead after police say he opened fire at a McKinney Public Safety building.
We do know that one suspect is confirmed dead.
We had a tragedy that occurred here in our city, right in front of our public safety building, which obviously hits very close to home. None of our personnel on police or fire were injured during this incident. Very proud to say that.
If you're in the middle of an active shooter, Countermeasure Consulting implores you to do three things. You want to react. You want to understand something is happening. You want to escape. You want to get out of the building at all costs, and you want to survive. You want to do that for you, your family, and for others.
We cannot rely on the stupidity of our enemies because our enemies are resourceful, they're bright, and fight unfairly.
The active shooter probably has plenty of ammunition. The active shooter has plenty of magazines.
If we sit back and take the attitude of it'll never happen here, you've already lost. You've already become the sheep.
On the national average, it takes law enforcement 14 minutes to arrive.
Those 14 minutes are going to make a big difference between how many lives you're going to save versus how many are going to get lost.
This video is set up to help you mitigate those 14 minutes of what to do before the law enforcement gets there. We don't teach police response strategies, we don't teach military response strategies, and we don't teach fighting strategies. We teach common sense approach to safety.
The key is you have to take action.
One of the events that took place that I was involved in was at the McKinney Police Department. Someone woke up one morning and drove to the McKinney Police Department when his white Nissan pickup truck that was filled with ammonium nitrate. He proceeded to pop a flare in the front of the truck, popped the flare and threw it in the trailer, and then ran across the street and fired 168 rounds at the front of the police department.
And about that time, we see glass breakage. So we realized we were under fire by an active shooter from the outside that had come to attack our police building.
While he's doing this, he's waiting for an explosion to happen, thinking the ammonium nitrate would detonate. However, he got the formula incorrect. But his goal was to trump Oklahoma City.
I'll tell you that none of our personnel on police or fire were injured during this incident. Very proud to say that.
An active shooter is an individual who is going in to cause a great deal of harm to a group of people. The term shooter implies a firearm, but actually that's not one of the key components. And they will almost always choose the most vulnerable populations to go after.
They are not a new phenomenon. There's no geographic region that is excluded. Males account for approximately 75% of all offenders. 50% of attacks take place in under 12 minutes. 48% of incidents end by force, whether it's by police or citizens.
I think trying to profile an active shooter is like trying to profile a drunk driver. There are lots of reasons why people drive drunk, and it's really not relevant if you're on the receiving end. I'm more focused on what they do, because what they do has some consistencies. Why they do it has a variety of reasons, and unfortunately we have seen that.
Usually they feel that someone has wronged them and they are trying to make it right by violence of action.
We have had people who've had some severe mental illness, or they have felt left out and they've decided to make a name for themselves.
And that's the only similarities that we can find so far.
That's why I prefer to talk a little bit about what they do. We do know that some of the best predictors of behavior is what people say they're going to do. So if someone says that they are going to commit a violent act, I would take them at their word and I would call the police. Most people who have violent fantasies do not act on them. Now you start putting things together, they have fantasies, they start writing down those fantasies, then they start collecting firearms and ammunition and come up with a plan of people they're going to kill. That's taking action. Only if a friend happens to pick up on it, someone that they trust, are you likely to have any idea that that's occurring. A long time ago, I was in Afghanistan, and it was when we had first gotten there, and we didn't know much about it, and I was up on the second floor of a very rickety old hangar. And all of a sudden, the hangar started shaking. But I just assumed somebody was bringing in a large jet, and it wasn't until I gradually, slowly wandered back outside to see what was causing the noise that I recognized that we were in the middle of an earthquake. So I had done exactly the wrong things. I had interpreted it as a safe noise, not to be worried about.
The majority of people that I've interviewed after active shooters have all stopped and asked each other, is that a gunshot? Do I hear shots being fired? Did this just happen? What are we going to do?
You hear loud noises all the time. Not, oh my goodness, that might be someone actually trying to kill people.
If you hear a gunshot, you don't want to stop and think, did I just hear a gunshot?
3 words I'd like you to remember are react, escape, and survive. React to the threat, escape from the threat, so that you can survive. Must do something. We spend a lot of time and trouble training people to do fire drills to get out of a building. So if you think about that, with all the emphasis that we give to fire drills and how deadly fires are, you see the challenge involved in getting people to recognize the threat with an active shooter.
If you hear gunfire, if you see gunfire, you may have some risks in your brain that you are trying to process in slow motion. You need to train your paradigm. If I think I hear a gunshot, I'm going to get up and I'm going to leave.
How do you train people to react in a way that's effective under high levels of stress?
Some people, they just don't know what they don't know, unless you've been in these situations before. You just don't know how you're going to react.
Even though in situations that are oftentimes openly perilous on their face, we're still surprised when something bad happened to us.
You know, in times of stress, you're going to rise to the threat. Well, you know, studies show time and time again, you don't rise to the threat, you default to your level of training. So under stress, if you're going to default to your level of training, you better make sure you have the best training possible.
If you remember nothing else, you must do something. People don't necessarily want to react. Let me not rush into this. Let me just see what's happening. This has never happened before. There's got to be something else going on.
I break it down. What would I do or what would I want to know when faced with one of these problems?
One is action versus reaction. The notion of action versus reaction that we must understand is that the bad guy always has the jump on us.
I see something and then I respond to it, understanding what it is. And those are called reaction intervals. And if you overlay that with the OODA loop, that if you are a threat to me, I have a certain number of reaction intervals I have to do.
Bad guy has already set up and observed, oriented, and decided when to strike us. They're just waiting to act. And that acronym is called an OODA loop. Observe, orient, decide, and act.
you present threatening behavior towards me, I have to understand that there is threatening behavior coming towards me. That's one reaction interval. For the average trained individual to respond to a threat requires about 1.5 seconds.
That's an eternity in a firefight. It doesn't sound like much, but that's a big jump.
How far can the average person run in about 1.5 seconds? 21 feet, 25 feet.
Preparation and practice. Be prepared. Practice what you are thinking. Know where your exits are. Know where your entrances are. Know the other employees around you. Report suspicious behavior immediately.
Our decision that action versus reaction is often clouded by disbelief. Oh my gosh, is this really happening to me?
There's no need to panic when you're faced with a situation. You know what is going on, you know how to control, and you can deal with.
So that's the first lesson there.
The more information you have, the more data you collect and your ability to process it, the better decisions you're going to make.
Once you've realized that you need to take some action, you need to get out to escape.
In 2011, I was on vacation with my family. We were driving on Cape Canaveral Avenue towards Cocoa Beach, and my 14-year-old daughter looked out the window and said, "There's someone shooting in an office park." Sure enough, there was a gunman engaged in a firefight with police, and there was a ton of traffic ahead of us. Literally, people just, what I like to say is stuck on stupid. They weren't in fight or flight mode, they were in stuck mode. We were in a rental car, and we literally pushed our way out of the area, made a hard left turn into oncoming traffic, but we were moving away from the sound of the gunfire instead of moving to. At that time, in my mind, I was a father and a husband getting my family away from a gunman and not a policeman responding to the sound of bullets.
But you've got to evacuate yourself out of the danger area. You've got to move, and you've got to do that first. You have a family, you have friends.
Wait and see is not an option, because the more time you give a shooter, the more damage they're going to do. The mission of an active shooter is killing and executing people for no reason at all, with no worries about their own self-preservation or life.
It tells us that force is going to be required to stop this person. The odds of you having the force to do that are minimal. If you're sitting in an office, you are not prepared for that. You will be under a huge amount of stress when this occurs. So remember, run, hide, fight. 14 minutes is a very long time. Regardless of how far you move, by breaking out of that stasis of just sitting there going, I wonder what's going on, you're thinking in your head, that slows you down. You need to be moving and acting.
In a corporate environment, there's a lot of closed-in spaces, and it's very hard to find an escape path. You should previously know where that escape path is after watching this training. If you know the exit is behind you and there's a shooter in front of you, you need to remain as low as possible while moving as fast as possible to that exit and escape. Open environments or open spaces, the retail areas, like the Kansas Mall shooting. People were exposed to this active shooter that was walking through shooting people at random because they were stuck in just watching him. They weren't aware of their environment, they weren't aware of which direction to go to, and they had no training, and this is no fault of their own. No one ever taught them this information. If you're in these open area environments, such as a retail store, continue to move. You're less likely to be a target if you're moving, because the shooter that's walking through any one of those areas I talked about is looking for the easy targets of opportunity.
You need to be moving and acting and getting out of the danger area.
That safety is behind cover.
Cover means protection from firearms. So cover isn't the same thing as hiding. It means that a cartridge, a bullet, will not make it through that cover to injure you.
During the incident, the McKinney Police Department, what he was trying to do was draw the police and the firefighters out so he could shoot them one at a time. What he didn't realize was the plume of smoke blinded him from the front of the department. Concealment. And when I use that word, it's a mask. Think of it as disguising yourself so you can't be seen. So a building or cinder block wall would be a good piece of cover. A glass window would not be cover. Once you're in a safe, covered area, Begin to use your phone. Call 911. What about my friend that doesn't want to come? You're gonna have to let your friend be. It's about self-preservation at that point in time. The kids heard an explosion and they were reacting to what they thought was a fire. So they ran to another direction where another IED went off and it sent the kids back, and what it did was it bottled them back into the library where they were trapped. Only thing students were trained for was to get under a desk and wait for help. These two children ran around and hunted the kids under the desk and executed them one by one. Stopping and doing nothing is similar to some footage that we have of Columbine High School shooting. We have students running one way, only to find out that it was a trap, because their goal was to end life that day and then end their own lives. So when we say hide is not your best option, it's because the people that are hiding are stationary targets. When you're dealing with this type of situation, you want to develop the mindset of survival. If you can't run and get out of the office safely or out of the open area safely, you will not allow this person to cause you damage and fail to let you go home.
The Department of Homeland Security says hide, and I don't disagree with that, but there are some real serious consequences that could occur from that.
The shooter at Virginia Tech just went and hunted who he wanted to shoot at will. The largest amount of deaths in one single place was in one of the classrooms where a professor tried to lock them in a room and wouldn't let them leave, and this person found that room that didn't lock, opened the door, and shot the professor first and then the kids.
That's why I prefer to talk about prepare to evacuate. So the entire time you're hiding, you're not hiding. You are planning, preparing to evacuate the danger area. You may temporarily have to keep out of the line of fire, but you're not going to stay there, and you never think about yourself staying there. While you're hiding, be prepared to move. That is not a permanent stasis, except under the most extraordinary circumstances.
And you know a gunman is outside in the corridor. You want to secure the view. You want to hide out of sight from them. You want to silence your cell phone and get down behind your desk and just be as quiet as possible.
It could take 45 minutes before the police are able to neutralize the threat.
Hide behind a wall, solid core door that has a double lock cylinder. Behind a desk, remember to black out the shades. Silence your cell phone and try to remain there until it's safe to escape.
The probability of that person surviving just increased.
At all costs, should you not be able to do any of those things, don't become a victim and don't become a statistic.
Homeland Security says fight, and I'd be a little more aggressive and I'd say attack.
Gather a couple people and attack the shooter as violently and swiftly as possible to stop the threat.
Now, is that a good idea? No, it's a horrible idea, but it may be the best of some really bad alternatives that you have, realizing it needs to be as violent and as hard as you possibly can put forth.
We call it, in the military, field expedient weapons. In the police department, we use our utility belt. If you are in an office building and you are behind a desk and a shooter comes in and you have no safe way out, hit them. And don't stop hitting them until you survive. If you have a chair, hit them with a chair. If you have a phone, smack them in the head with a phone. If you can dive over a cubicle on top of someone and take them to the ground, yell for help and ask for other people to help you incapacitate the shooter. Hit the gun out of their hand. Hit them in the face. Hit them anywhere that you think it might hurt them, but you want to incapacitate the shooter as quickly as possible.
Attack with everything and everyone that you have.
The shooter will not stop until he inflicts as many casualties as possible. Make them the statistic. The law is on your side, and your family's on your side. During an active shooting event, there is going to be a time that police arrive. Whether it's 14 minutes or under or 14 minutes or later, they are going to show up. And when they do, there's some procedures that you need to follow. The first one you need to remember is you need to remain as calm as possible as you exit the building or as you're outside talking to the officers with as much information as possible, because they are responding to the report of someone firing a gun, and they don't know if that's you or someone else.
your body is going to physiologically respond as it should, which is in a life-threatening event. Your pulse will go through the roof, your pupils will dilate, you'll start to sweat. You've probably read that you may have involuntary bowel movements. You may want to freeze, which is why we spend so much time telling you you've got to move. But then once it's over, well, you all of a sudden have this huge response to being safe. Some of that may be talking. Some of that may just being wanting to go up and talk to the policeman, touch the policeman, likely to get you into serious trouble.
Ever since the shooting at Columbine, the response tactics of police have transformed tremendously. Where they would used to show up, surround, create a perimeter, and call SWAT, now there's a less traditional approach.
We had mass casualties, we had propane tanks that went off. The children, I mean, they're ingrained in our minds, the children walking across the field with their hands up. And now, of course, we've got the tragedy in Connecticut, the most recent one.
Now the police show up. When the second or third police officer shows up on scene, they're entering your building. They're not there to repair the damage or fix the casualties. Even the people that are reaching out to them, please help me, please help me. They're there to stop the threat, which is the active shooter.
It's hard words, but it kind of drives the point home. Our job is to save lives. The ones that are injured, they're either going to survive or they're going to die. But why risk 50 more kids by stopping your advancement? In order to help these people, we've got to stop the threat. We've got to stop the threat or isolate it.
They don't know who the shooter is, the odds are. They don't know what he looks like. They don't know what he's dressed like. All they know is that there's someone in there killing people. So as soon as there is any chance of you being observed by the police, you need to do a couple of things. One is, if at all possible, stay still. Second is make sure that your hands are able to be seen by the police. Policemen are highly attuned to looking to where the hands are, and that they know that you are not one of the bad people. It may be possible that the police still don't know that for sure, so they might actually handcuff you. Be prepared to deal with that and do not fight it.
Be ready to corral yourself and your neighbors and your office mates in a safe area away from the active shooter if it's not resolved yet. And try to keep it as calm as possible, even though it's an incredibly violent account. The calmer you are, the better your chances are of surviving the incident. The most important thing is, do not go back until it's told all clear and safe to do so.
They're not there to treat wounded. They're not there to evacuate you. They're there to find that shooter and stop that shooter as soon as possible before he can kill anybody else. There'll be a medical team that'll be on their way. There'll be people to evacuate you out of there right behind them, but that's not their job.
Preparation, practice. I'll tell you that being involved in other active shooting events, the two as a police officer dictated a very specific response. The one as a civilian probably woke me up because I knew that when my daughter said, "Dad, someone's shooting," I actually closed my eyes after we got through it and said, what would my wife do at work? What would you do at work?
The less you have to think about, the better. An office is not a place of a threat. Why would you ever think that an office is going to have a threat, going to have some risk involved with it?
If we sit back and take the attitude of it'll never happen here, you've already lost. You've already become the sheep.
It's that cognitive shift between a safe environment to recognizing that there is a danger. The active shooter is prepared. The active shooter probably has plenty of ammunition. The active shooter has plenty of magazines.
We cannot rely on the stupidity of our enemies.
The more information you have and your ability to process it, the better decisions you're going to make.
Must do something.
You want to react.
React to the threat.
You want to understand something is happening. Wait and see is not an option, because the more time you give a shooter, the more damage they're going to do. If I think I hear a gunshot, I'm going to get up and I'm going to leave. You want to escape.
Escape from the threat.
You want to get out of the building at all costs.
Force is required to stop this person. The odds of you having the force to do that are minimal. So remember, react, escape, survive.
And you want to survive.
So that you can survive.
You want to do that for you, your family, and for others.
If you remember nothing else, you must do something.
There is going to be a time that police arrive. And when they do, you need to remain as calm as possible as you exit the building. They are responding to a report of someone firing a gun, and they don't know if that's you or someone else. In summary, you want to be ready for an active shooter at all costs. You don't want to be a victim. You want to have a survival mindset. You want to know what actions you're going to take. You want to be aware of your surroundings.
We can never be too prepared to respond to the threat of perpetrators going to come into our schools and do some harm to our children or our staff.
If you've watched this video, you should know where the exits are. You should have a predetermined escape path. But the key focal point is, do not stop moving until you are safe. Once you're safe, you have survived the event. The rest can be dealt with later.
In the event of a fire alarm, you must evacuate the building to your rally point. Stay within your designated groups so that a proper head count can be done. For a tornado, air horns will be deployed and you will proceed to your designated tornado shelter area. Management will give you updates on the current weather radar. Stay away from any glass and seek shelter under a desk if possible. There is very little warning for an earthquake, but if this event occurs, seek shelter immediately. When the earthquake has ended, wait for your manager to give further instructions. Whistles are located at numerous workstations throughout the facility. These are only to be deployed in the event of an active shooter. Blowing the whistle under false pretenses will result in termination and can result in criminal charges. In the event of an active shooter, get to your designated rally point and wait for further instructions. The following video will give you instructions on how you are expected to handle this situation. The term accident applies to any event that results in property damage or damage to your body. A near miss is defined as any event that could have resulted in property or body damage. Reporting near misses allows for the opportunity to prevent an accident. STA policy states that you can face disciplinary action for not reporting. A listing of the prior year's accidents can be found at the department bulletin boards for your reference. You will be exposed to more than 85 decibels of sound. Per OSHA requirements, you will be required to wear hearing protection at all times. We will perform hearing tests on an annual basis so long as you are employed. Your first test will be called your baseline test. This allows us to determine your current hearing levels. Every year thereafter, we will monitor your hearing loss to ensure that it is age appropriate. Please see your supervisor to be properly fitted for hearing protection. Personal protective equipment is required when completing specific tasks. Eye protection is required when using anything that creates a dust or when using specific chemicals. Hearing protection is required at all times. Chemical-resistant gloves are required when handling volatile chemicals that can damage your skin. Cut-resistant gloves are required when handling any unguarded blades. Maintenance personnel are required to wear shaded lenses when welding and electrical protective clothing anytime coming into direct contact with exposed electrical energy. Your supervisor will review specific job instructions with you that require PPE. Please review the provided safety data sheet. This is the format that all SDS sheets are required to be in. Please note that number 4 is first aid. You have been given a pictogram page. Please keep this for your personal records. In the event of a large chemical spill, get a supervisor immediately. Only trained employees can clean up large spills. SDS books are located next to the first aid cabinet in all departments or in the safety coordinator's office. Your supervisor will be responsible for ensuring that you are educated on the specific chemicals you will be using initially, and the safety coordinator will inform you of any new chemicals that will be introduced.
To help prevent accidents and injuries, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, or OSHA, developed the Hazard Communication Standard, commonly referred to as HAZCOM, or the Right to Know law. This regulation gives you the right to know which chemicals are being used in your workplace and the possible dangers you are being exposed to. You also have the right to know how to protect yourself when using hazardous chemicals. As part of the Hazard Communication Standard, your employer is required to provide you with the knowledge and training necessary for you to do your job safely. While OSHA maintained the framework of its traditional HAZCOM standard, it adopted the GHS hazard definitions and safety data sheet and labeling formats. GHS mandates a consistency in format and information for every hazardous chemical, and is a worldwide standard for the countries that choose to use them. A hazardous chemical is any chemical which is classified as a physical hazard or a health hazard, a simple asphyxiant, combustible dust, pyrophoric gas, or hazard not otherwise classified. Physical hazards are those chemicals which can cause a fire, explosion, or some other violent reaction when they come in contact with air, water, or other chemicals. Chemicals that threaten people's health are called health hazards. By entering the body in one of three ways, inhalation, skin contact, or ingestion, these chemicals can cause both short-term or acute health problems and long-term or chronic health problems. OSHA considers a health hazard to be any chemical which is toxic, is corrosive to the skin or eyes, is a respiratory sensitizer that may cause cancer, birth defects, or reproductive issues, which attack specific organs in the body, or which are harmful or deadly when inhaled. You've probably figured out that working with chemicals without a proper understanding of them can be quite dangerous. So, the HAZCOM standard mandates that your employer complies with 5 regulatory requirements. 1. Create an inventory of all hazardous chemicals at the workplace. 2. Ensure each chemical has a GHS-style safety data sheet, or SDS, that is easily accessible to all employees who work with that chemical. 3. Ensure each chemical container is properly labeled with a GHS-style approved label or an OSHA-approved workplace label. 4. Create and implement an employee HAZCOM training program. And 5. Develop a written program that describes how the HAZCOM program has been implemented. You have the right to know about each of these 5 requirements, because if they aren't followed, you aren't protected. Creating a chemical inventory is the first step to ensuring a safe work environment. When a chemical arrives at your workplace, the hazard information is passed along with it so it can be added to your company's chemical inventory, creating a list of vital information. OSHA requires that each company keep a complete and up-to-date inventory of all its hazardous chemicals. This list not only identifies all the hazardous chemicals on site, it is used to make sure each chemical is accounted for, is properly labeled, and has an up-to-date SDS. This includes chemicals used off-site as well. Safety data sheets are one of the most important tools to help ensure your safety. And one of the biggest advantages to having a standardized format is you'll know exactly where to look when you need to find information quickly. The SDS explains everything you need to know to safely work with a specific chemical, from what it looks and smells like, to its potential hazards, to what to do in the event of an accident. To be compliant with GHS, all safety data sheets must have the GHS-specified 16-section format and include certain types of information in each section. The standard format better ensures that all employers and employees understand the chemical, its hazards, and the precautions users must take to remain safe. Let's take a look at a GHS-style safety data sheet and the information it contains for a hypothetical chemical we'll call Solvent X, a chemical mixture used to flush equipment. In Section 1, Products and Company Identification, we see the official name of the chemical as well as other names it goes by. This section may also contain recommended uses of the chemical and restrictions on its use, the supplier's details, including name, address and phone number, and an emergency phone number. Under Section 2, Hazards Identification, we see the hazards that are associated with this chemical, along with the information that's required to be on the chemical's label, including the pictograms, signal word, hazard statement, and precautionary statement. When looking at Section 3, Composition Information on Ingredients, we see what ingredients have been used to create the chemical and which of those are known to be hazardous. Section 4, First Aid Measures. describes the treatment methods you should use to help yourself or someone else who's been exposed to the chemical. Section 5, firefighting measures, describes the combustibility of the chemical, any possible secondary results if there is a fire, and how to put out a fire if this chemical is involved. Section 6, accidental release measures, describes cleanup procedures in the event of a spill. Under Section 7, handling and storage, we see the safe ways to work with and store the chemical. Section 8, exposure controls, personal protection, shows the minimum amount of time a person could be exposed to the chemical before being potentially affected, and how to protect yourself through proper clothing and handling techniques. Section 9, physical and chemical properties, outlines the chemical's characteristics, such as its normal appearance, odor, solubility, melting and freezing points, flash point, evaporation rate, flammability, vapor pressure, and density. Section 10, stability and reactivity, describes how stable the chemical is, as well as the conditions that create instability. The chemical's toxicity, or the degree to which it is poisonous, and other potential health hazards are found in Section 11, toxicological information. This section lists both acute and chronic health conditions that can result from overexposure to the chemical. Section 12, ecological information, describes how the chemical interacts with the environment, including how long it will last, how it spreads, and any other pertinent information. Section 13, disposal considerations, explains how the chemical should be discarded. Section 14, transport information, instructs on the safe and unsafe ways of moving the chemical. Section 15, regulatory information, describes the safety, health, and environmental laws specific to the chemical. And Section 16, other information, includes any additional details that are important to disclose regarding the chemical, as well as the date the SDS was prepared. By utilizing the standardized form for all hazardous chemicals, whether you work with that chemical every day or you just happen to be in the area when disaster strikes, you'll be able to determine exactly what to do quickly and effectively, because you'll know exactly what to look for and where to look for it on the SDS. OSHA does not dictate a specific place for companies to keep their safety data sheets, but it does say they must be in a location that's easily accessible by all employees. In some companies, SDSs are stored on a computer. In still other companies, hard copies of SDSs are kept on site in 3-ring binders. Whatever the method used, your employer is required to make sure you can get the critical SDS information you need quickly, clearly, and easily. Safety data sheets truly are a wealth of information. It's vitally important that you know where to find them for every chemical you work with, and take the time to read and understand each one thoroughly. If a chemical emergency occurs, that should not be the first time you're reading the SDS. The safety data sheet is not your only source for information on the hazardous chemicals you work with. Each hazardous chemical container must also be labeled with both the chemical name and other vital quick reference information. The HAZCOM standard requires that there be 6 GHS-compliant label elements: product identifier or ingredient disclosure, signal word, hazard statement, pictograms, precautionary statement, and supplier identification. Let's take a closer look at these elements. The product identifier or ingredient disclosure describes just that: the name of the chemical or a brand name, or the hazardous ingredients the chemical contains, or both. The signal word, if required, discloses the relative level of hazard severity. Danger is used for more severe hazards, and warning is used for less severe hazards. The hazard statement describes the type, nature, and degree of the hazards associated with the chemical. The pictogram is always a black symbol shown on a white background and surrounded by a red diamond-shaped border. These images are used to depict all the physical, health, or environmental hazards caused by a particular chemical. All of the hazards that apply to that specific chemical will be shown. In all, there are 9 pictogram symbols: oxidizers, flammables, explosives, acute toxicity, corrosives, gases under pressure, health hazards, environmental hazards, and health, irritant, or other harmful effects. The precautionary statement describes actions that should be taken to prevent or minimize the negative effects that could result from exposure to the chemical or from its improper storage or handling. And the supplier identification includes the name and contact information of the supplier, manufacturer, or importer of the product. Your employer can also choose to relabel the chemicals in your workplace with an OSHA-approved label in order to make sure all the chemicals in your company's inventory are labeled consistently and in a way that you and your coworkers can easily understand. Relabeling might happen when a large quantity of a chemical is broken down into smaller ones and then distributed to different work areas within your company. The one exception to this is if you transfer a chemical from a larger, labeled container to a smaller, more portable one, and use the chemical in that smaller container during your immediate work shift. But the only person who is allowed to use the smaller container is you, the person who did the transfer. So while SDSs are a complete resource for the chemicals you work with, labels are a quick and immediate reference. You should always review a container's label before using the chemical to ensure that it is in fact the chemical you believe it to be. You never know when a container that you think you are familiar with gets changed. The label will tell you for sure. While it's essential to have the safety data sheets and labels at your disposal when working with hazardous chemicals, what brings it all together is the training you receive from your employer. OSHA requires that each person who works with hazardous chemicals be trained on the Hazard Communication Standard. This includes being trained on hazardous chemical container labeling, safety data sheets, and the chemical inventory. Additionally, your employer must provide you with specialized training for the specific chemicals you use in your job. Knowledge is the best defense against the hazards you face in your job. By actively participating in these opportunities, you'll be ready for almost any threat that comes your way. The fifth requirement of the HazCom standard, which is the written program, pertains more to your employer than to you directly. However, you still have rights related to it. The purpose of the written program is to document, in detail, your employer's plans for communicating the hazards and risks involved with using the chemicals in your workplace. And you do have the right to review this written program whenever you want, so you can see what your employer is doing to keep you and your coworkers knowledgeable and safe regarding the chemicals in your workplace. However, the ultimate responsibility for your safety is not in the hands of your employer. You must take ownership of your safety. And here are a few of the actions you can take. Remove all jewelry to avoid skin reactions. Use face and eye protection if the chemical could be splashed in your face. Be especially careful if you wear contacts, because chemical splashes or vapors can easily become trapped under your lenses. When you finish handling a chemical, wash your hands thoroughly and make sure safety gear is clean and properly stored. Don't eat, drink, or smoke near any hazardous chemicals. Make sure you know where the nearest eye wash station or emergency shower is located. Dispose of hazardous chemicals as directed by your employer. Never mix chemical wastes unless you know that it's safe to do so. And know your company's policy for dealing with spills or leaks. Finally, know how your employer wants you to respond if an incident involving a hazardous chemical happens near you or a coworker. Ultimately, in an emergency, it is up to you. You need to know what will make the situation worse and what will make the situation better. This means reading, understanding, and following the guidelines of the chemical SDSs and labels you work with, so you know how to handle any situation that comes along. Knowledge is essential when working with hazardous chemicals. It's your safety that's at stake. By learning as much as you can about hazard communication, the globally harmonized system, and the chemicals you work with, you can be better assured that every day will be a safe one for you and the people you work with.
You are only permitted to use company-provided knives. All other knives are considered a weapon. While using knives, please remember to follow basic knife safety rules. You will not be permitted to use an unguarded blade to complete a task without the use of cut-resistant gloves. In your packet, there is a blade safety agreement. Please read the entire agreement and sign. This will be returned to the HR department at the end of this training. There are 3 containers that are used for disposing of blades, all of which are pictured. The red sharps containers are only to be used for biohazardous blades. These will be defined as any blade that has perforated the skin. A bloodborne pathogen is an infectious microorganism in human blood that can cause disease in humans. The most severe pathogens are HIV, hepatitis B, and hepatitis C. HIV is transmitted only in certain bodily fluids from an infected person. Hepatitis B and C are transmitted when the body fluids of an infected person enters the body of a person not infected. Hepatitis attacks the liver and is currently the leading cause of liver failure. You are not permitted to assist in cleaning up any other person's bodily fluids or assisting in first aid. You must get a supervisor or first responder. The first responders list is located on all bulletin boards. To clean your own bodily fluids, locate the designated disinfectant solution located on top of your first aid cabinet. Spray thoroughly and allow to sit for 2 minutes. The sharps containers outside of all restrooms in the plant are designated for products that contain a large amount of bodily fluid. Arc flash is a dangerous and possibly fatal condition caused by the possible release of thermal energy caused by an electrical arc. The machines you will be working with all have the potential to create this energy. Only maintenance personnel are designated to perform electrical maintenance, and they are required to wear appropriate PPE for the task. Lockout and tagout equipment are located at every coder and slitter machine. Any machine that only has one source of energy, such as a single plug, is not required to be locked. The plug must be disconnected from the power source, visually controlled, until maintenance arrives. Assistants will not lock out machines, but will be advised when the operator is doing so. Operators will be given job-specific tasks that require locking out their machines during their training. Maintenance personnel are required to control energy before performing maintenance on machinery.
Power and energy are located throughout the facility and exist in many different forms, including electric, pneumatic, hydraulic, chemical, mechanical, and thermal. If energy is not controlled, it can present serious health and safety hazards. Consider these alarming statistics. OSHA has determined that in the United States alone, preventable workplace accidents involving uncontrolled energy sources result in 50,000 injuries and claim 120 lives each year. When it's time to maintain or service machines, equipment, or infrastructure, proper safety procedures require energy to be locked out or otherwise controlled before work can begin. To help maintain safety in the workplace, OSHA and other worldwide health and safety organizations provide rules and guidelines that help companies develop a total energy control program. Compliance with lockout-tagout standards is required by law and enforced by OSHA. The good news is that you hold the key to safety in your company. By using a lockout-tagout energy control program, you can help prevent workplace accidents and injuries, both to yourself and to other workers. So what is lockout-tagout and when should you use it? Lockout-tagout is a complete program used to control hazardous energy during the servicing or maintenance of machines and equipment when the unexpected startup of the equipment or the release of stored energy could cause injuries to employees. Service and maintenance includes the following activities: installation, replacement, modification, inspection, lubrication, cleaning, and more. The following 4 elements make up a complete lockout-tagout energy control program: energy control procedures, employee training, lockout-tagout hardware, and periodic internal inspections. Element 1. Energy control procedures. Documentation is key to an effective lockout-tagout program. Written procedures must be developed that identify the information that all employees need to know in order to control potentially hazardous energy during servicing or maintenance. This energy control procedure must outline the scope, purpose, authorization, rules, and techniques that will be used to control hazardous energy sources, as well as the means that will be used to enforce compliance. This documentation should contain a statement of how the procedure will be used, the steps required for safe shutdown, including how to isolate, lock, and secure machines and equipment, the procedure for removing and storing lockout-tagout devices with a clear designation of the personnel responsible for these tasks, and clear requirements for testing and verification of lock and tag effectiveness. It is important these procedures are machine-specific and clearly identify all energy sources. Element 2. Certified training. Companies must certify that training or retraining on lockout-tagout procedures is provided to all employees covered by OSHA Standard 1910.147. The certification program must include keeping up-to-date records of employees and their training dates. Training must take place anytime there is a change in job assignment, change in the energy control procedures, or if an inspection reveals the need for retraining. The degree of training required is determined by the work responsibilities of each employee, who are then placed into one of several categories: authorized employees, affected employees, and other. Authorized employees are responsible for implementing energy control procedures and performing the required servicing or maintenance. Training for authorized employees includes details about the type and magnitude of the hazardous energy sources present at the facility and the methods for isolating and controlling these energy sources. Authorized employees must also receive training on machine-specific procedures. Affected employees, on the other hand, simply perform their duties in the area in which an energy control procedure is being implemented. Affected employees are not themselves responsible for locking and tagging out, and they are not authorized to do so. The final designation is other employees. These workers include office or warehouse personnel who may work in an area where an energy control procedure is utilized. The responsibilities of affected and other employees are to recognize when energy control procedures are being implemented and to understand the purpose of these procedures. They must not attempt to start up or use equipment that has been locked or tagged out and must relay all such requests to the authorized employee on duty. Element 3. Tags and lockout devices. Many types of lockout-tagout products are available to help control energy and enhance worker safety. Specific OSHA requirements govern the use of these devices. Tags and lockout devices must be used only for the specific lockout-tagout application. Both tags and locks must be standardized by color, shape, or size. Tags must conform to a standard print size or format. They are also required to be durable enough to withstand the environment to which they are exposed for the maximum duration of the expected exposure. Finally, tags and locks must be identifiable and must clearly identify the employee who applies them. Locks and lockout devices must be substantial enough to prevent removal except by excessive force, with special tools such as bolt cutters or other metal cutting tools. If you lose your key, your supervisor should be alerted immediately. Tags must warn against any anticipated hazard. Tag tie must be attachable by hand, self-locking, and non-reusable, with a minimum locking strength of no less than 50 pounds. Element 4. Inspection. Each employer must ensure personnel understand and comply with all relevant and applicable energy control program regulations. Periodic inspection of each lockout-tagout procedures must be performed at least once a year by an authorized employee other than the one utilizing the energy control procedure under inspection. These inspections are designed to ensure that energy control procedures are still adequate, continue to be properly implemented, and that employees are familiar with their responsibilities under these procedures. The documentation of the periodic inspections must make note of the machine that is locked and tagged out, the inspection date, the employee responsible for locking and tagging out, and the inspector. When a lockout procedure is inspected, the inspector must review the responsibilities of each authorized employee, ensuring that they understand and can properly implement all steps in the procedure. If it is revealed that there are deviations or inadequacies in the employee's knowledge or use of the energy control procedures, retraining should be conducted. Now let's take a look at some example lockout-tagout practices. The procedures for shutdown and startup should be straightforward. When equipment must be shut down for maintenance or repair, make sure you understand the type and magnitude of the energy, the hazards to be controlled, and the methods or means to control the energy before attempting to shut it down. After you prepare for the shutdown and announce the shutdown to all affected employees, turn off the equipment using normal stopping procedures. Then disconnect the power source or sources to isolate the equipment. In the case of electrically powered machines, this means taking action at the disconnect or breaker that feeds the machine. Do not rely on just the push button or on-off switch. Always disconnect the energy source after turning the machine off. If you disconnect the machine under load, you risk damaging the equipment. Take the time to make sure you have isolated the equipment from all energy sources. Many machines have more than one source of power. After you've turned off the equipment and isolated it from the power source, test to make sure the equipment is isolated by trying the on-off controls or using test instruments. Remember to leave these controls in the off or neutral position. The next step is to properly lock out machinery to ensure that energy is not restored while you are working on the equipment. Locking out a machine involves more than just turning it off. A lock must be applied to all on-off switches and controls to physically prevent access to them. Use only your own lock to lock out the equipment you are working on. And remember, locks used for lockouts should be used only for lockouts. Don't use lockout locks on tool chests, lockers, or cabinets. Use them only for lockouts. Then, tag out the equipment to provide a visual alert that work is being performed. Start by using a secure tie to place your tag at the disconnect point. Finish by signing your name and writing down the date and the type of work you are doing. Occasionally, it is physically impossible to use a lock to lock out a piece of equipment. In those cases, it is absolutely essential to follow tag-out procedures. That tag may be the only thing between you and serious injury. Keep in mind that no matter how good the tag is, a tag can never substitute for a lock. It's a visual warning, but it doesn't provide vital physical protection. These procedures may appear to be excessively cautious, but when a life is on the line, there is no point in taking chances. After you've affixed the necessary lockout-tagout devices, release stored energy and bring the equipment to a zero mechanical state. Now, even though you have locked the levers, valves, or switches in place, check them again and verify that all sources of energy are isolated by testing if necessary. Make sure no one is able to put them back in the on position. Retest all on-off controls and leave them in the off or neutral position. When the machinery is completely de-energized and when all movement has stopped, it's safe for you to go to work. Let's quickly review all shutdown steps again. 1. After you've prepared for the shutdown, announce the shutdown to all infected employees. 2. Turn off the equipment using normal stopping procedures. 3. Disconnect the energy source or sources to isolate the machine or equipment. 4. Lock out and/or tag out the energy sources to ensure that energy will not be restored. 5. Release all residual energy. 6. Verify isolation of all energy sources. It is now safe to begin maintenance or service on the equipment. Startup is every bit as important as shutdown. When the work is completed, follow procedures for restoring the equipment to running conditions. First, make sure you remove all tools, reconnect any lines, and put machine guards back in place. Before you remove the lock and tag and re-energize the equipment, announce that the equipment is being turned on again and confirm that all employees are safely positioned. Lockout-tagout devices can now be removed by the employee who applied them. If you are the last one to unlock, notify the area supervisor before restoring energy. When the work is done and all locks and tags are removed, restore energy to the equipment. Finally, it's a good idea to ask the responsible operator to test run the equipment to make sure it's operating correctly before you leave. When multiple people need to perform servicing or maintenance, group lockout-tagout procedures should be used. Group lockout-tagout should give all employees the same level of protection as using personal lockout-tagout. A principal authorized employee should be assigned to oversee the lockout activities of the group of workers. If multiple crews are involved, each group should have a principal authorized employee. Another authorized employee should be assigned overall lockout-tagout responsibility to coordinate the procedure. During the procedures, each authorized employee must place their own lockout or tagout device on the group lockout device, such as a hasp or group lockbox. They must also remove their own device after the service or maintenance is completed. When your shift is over, take your lock with you after the next shift arrives. Continuity is critical. Let the new shift snap their locks into place before you remove your own lock. When outside contractors are working at your facility, your company and the outside contractor must communicate to each other the details of lockout-tagout procedures used by both companies. Your company must ensure that its employees understand and comply with the restrictions and prohibitions of the contractor's energy control procedures. If the authorized employee who applied a lockout-tagout device is not available, the employer must take the following steps before removing the device. Verify that the authorized employee is not in the facility. Make all reasonable efforts to contact the authorized employee and inform him or her that the device was removed, and ensure that the authorized employee is aware that the device was removed before he or she resumes work. If lockout or tagout devices must be temporarily removed for testing or positioning of the machine, the regular startup and shutdown procedures must be used to re-energize and de-energize the equipment or machinery. Lockout-tagout is a key part of a complete and effective safety program. But do not forget about other components of a safety program, such as PPE or safety signage, for example. Effective lockout-tagout procedures manage workplace risks by controlling the release of hazardous energies during equipment maintenance and servicing. Also, while employee safety is a top priority, establishing a comprehensive lockout-tagout program protects a company from legal and financial risks and is well worth the investment. Locking out and tagging out. Small steps we all must take when a life is on the line.
Fire extinguishers are located throughout the department in multiple locations and labeled with visual signs.
Each year in the United States, 70 to 80,000 workplaces experience a serious fire. On average, an estimated 200 employees are killed by fire-related incidents a year, with an estimated 5,000 employees sustaining fire-related injuries. Fires in the workplace result in over $2 billion in property damage and loss. Recent studies reveal that only 15% of workplace fires result in a catastrophic failure of equipment. This leaves a staggering 85% of accidental fires started due to human error and behavior. By being proactive and having a simple fire prevention plan and program in your workplace, you can greatly reduce the risks of having a fire in your place of employment. In addition, your employer should have a simple emergency plan, as well as proper detection and fire extinguishers to reduce your chances of injury or serious loss should a fire occur. This program will cover how fire works, preventing fires, classes of fires, preparing for a fire emergency, and the proper procedure to follow during a fire emergency. Fire is a chemical reaction between the three elements of heat, fuel, and oxygen. A fire will continue to burn as long as these three elements are present. It can only be extinguished when one of three things occur: the oxygen is depleted, the heat is removed, or the fuel is consumed. Fires start with heat, which serves as a source of ignition. Heat can be generated by several things, including open flames, static electricity, faulty electrical circuits, unshielded hot surfaces, friction, and chemical reactions. Fuels can include combustible solids like paper, wood, and some metals, and flammable liquids and gases. All places of business are required to have a fire prevention plan mandated by OSHA in accordance to Regulation 29 CFR 1910.39. This plan should be made available to all employees in writing if there are 11 or more people employed at your workplace. If there are fewer than 11 employees, your employer may choose to discuss the company fire prevention plan with you verbally. For a complete listing of the fire prevention plan requirements, please review the copy of the OSHA standard that accompanies this program. Some common causes of workplace fires include electrical neglect and misuse of wiring and electrical appliances, especially with the operation of space heaters. The use of certain chemicals in your workplace can result in the starting of a fire. These chemicals include gasoline, fuels, paints, solvents, and manufacturing chemicals. Always use these chemicals in well-ventilated areas and keep them away from heat and objects that can create sparks. Job sites that involve welding, torching, or other tasks that emit sparks are at a high risk of being involved in a workplace fire. A common and often overlooked area to be aware of for fire prevention is your company's housekeeping practices. The accumulation of garbage and the improper storage of flammable substances can cause a fire in work areas or storage rooms. And finally, the discarding of cigarettes or smoking in inappropriate areas can lead to the breakout of a fire in your workplace. There are 5 classes of fires you will need to know. By knowing the difference between these 5 classes of fires will help you determine which fire extinguisher you can use. The 5 classes of fires are broken down into Class A, Class B, Class C, Class D, and Class K. A Class A fire is the most common type of fire. It includes the burning of wood, paper, cloth, many types of plastics, and rubber. A Class B fire is a combustible fuel fire. This includes flammable liquids, oils, greases, gases, tars, and oil-based paints. A Class C fire involves energized electrical equipment. This type of fire cannot be put out with the use of water. Electrical shock can occur. A Class D fire is the burning of flammable metals, including sodium, titanium, magnesium, potassium, and lithium. Like a Class C fire, a Class D fire cannot be put out with water. Water can actually accelerate the fire. The last class of fire is a Class K fire. The Class K fire, or kitchen fire, is a subset of a Class B fire that involves cooking oils. Fire and/or smoke alarms should be installed in all areas of your workplace. They should be regularly checked for proper operation. All exits need to be properly identified and never blocked or locked. Fire doors, those designed to close during a fire to prevent spreading, should never be blocked open so as to prevent them from closing in case of a fire. Your company is required by OSHA, Regulation 29 CFR 1910.38, to have devised an emergency action plan. As with the fire prevention plan, this plan should be made available to you in writing if there are 11 or more employees at your workplace. If there are less than 11 employees, your employer can choose to discuss this plan with you verbally. For a complete listing of the emergency plan requirements, please review the copy of the OSHA standard that accompanies this program. It is important to know what type of fire extinguisher to use on the proper class of fire. Water-based fire extinguishers are to be used on Class A fires only. This removes the heat of the fire. Dry chemical-based extinguishers are to be used on Class A, B, C, or K fires. This inhibits a chemical reaction. carbon dioxide-based extinguishers are to be used on Class A, B, C, or K fires. The carbon dioxide removes the oxygen from the fire. Halogenated or clean agent-based extinguishers are to be used mainly on Class C fires, but can also be used to put out Class A, B, or K fires as well. These types of extinguishers also remove the oxygen from the fire. Metal X extinguishers are to be used on Class D fires. Your company should perform monthly inspections on its fire extinguishers. Be sure that all extinguishers are in the proper areas and are easily visible and accessible. It is important that you or someone within your workplace verifies that all extinguishers indicate the correct pressure for proper use. An annual professional inspection certified by your state's fire marshal needs to be completed. During this annual inspection, any maintenance needs to be completed according to the type and age of the extinguishers your company uses. During a fire emergency, remember the 3 A's. Activate the fire alarm and call 911. Assist others in exiting the building. Attempt to extinguish. You should only attempt to extinguish a fire if it is small and contained, you are safe from toxic smoke, you have a means of escape, and your instincts tell you it is all right. When operating a fire extinguisher, it is best to remember the operating procedure as PASS. P, pull the pin. A, aim the extinguisher at the base of the fire. S, squeeze the handle. And S, sweep from side to side. Never put yourself in any danger. Fire extinguishers are only designed to fight small fires and have only a few seconds of discharge. It takes only seconds for a small flame to get out of control and turn into a major fire. Remember, time is the biggest enemy and every second counts. When in doubt, you need to get out.
A machine guard is a safety feature that covers a hazardous area or that controls a hazard. There are many machine guards on the equipment: light curtains, emergency stops, safety mats, trip wires, and many more. Before working around your designated machinery, you will be trained on the specific machine guards and how they work. You must never bypass a machine guard. Please read and sign your machine guarding agreement. This will be given to the Human Resource Department upon completion of this training. You must always inspect your power tools before using. Make sure that they are in good working order, including your power cord. You must wear safety glasses. You must ensure that the cord does not create a trip hazard, and keep your hands away from any moving parts. Per Asperia policy, no employee shall lift over 75 pounds. Pay attention to your body. If you feel that you are straining too hard, stop and get assistance. Prevention to back, neck, and shoulder injuries begins with you. OSHA regulations state that no employee shall work at a height above 4 feet without a fall protection system. Do not climb on machinery, chairs, racks, or desks. If you have questions about what qualifies as a fall protection system, please contact your safety coordinator. Forklifts are dangerous machinery. As a pedestrian around forklift traffic, you should always remain aware. Never step into the path of a forklift without making the driver aware that you are there. You should make eye and verbal contact to ensure that they know that you are waiting. Wait for them to signal you to cross. Trip hazards cannot be completely eliminated in this setting, but they can be minimized. Please pick up after yourself, keep cords out of walkways, and clean up spilled liquids. Thank you for choosing Asperia Holdings as your employer, and remember, safety is a state of mind, accidents are an absence of mind.